From what I understand, you said you've sold over 1 million copies of books. How many books?
I'm working on number 30 right now.
So how long have you been an author then?
I was published 23 years ago.
Okay.
So I've seen a lot of changes in the publishing industry.
Like what?
Oh, well, with the ebooks. When I first published, there was no ebooks. And the internet really wasn't much of a thing, so I had no way to connect with other authors. I didn't, now it's so easy and there's so much information, but back when I was starting, you had to go to the library and check out a book and look at literary agents. I mean, you had to go to the mailbox with your manuscript. I mean, the post office.
A lot more footwork.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So tell me about that a little bit. I had, in preparation for this, I had kind of gone online and looked you up. And so it looks like you are pretty involved with other authors. And in fact, you talked about a book club. And so tell me about that a little bit. What does that do for you? And what does it do for them in working with the other authors?
Well, first of all, having critique and feedback is really nice because, when I first started, I was making my husband read my stuff, and his response was always, "It's good, I liked it," which is probably better for your marriage, but not very helpful as an author.
Sure.
So,
now would that have been an issue if he was pretty critical of it?
It could have been.
Could have been.
Fortunately, he's always been very supportive. But now it's so easy to join writers groups, and there's critique groups, and if you want to learn about deep point of view, you just Google deep point of view, and there's some author out there there's many authors that have been talking about it on their blogs, and so it's just so much easier to get information.
So does that information, going in and being able to go online and pull that information up, how much does that help you as an author?
So much. I mean, for research, my first book, and this was a book that took place in my old hometown. It was, there was no fantasy or sci-fi element. It was just a normal book, but still there were certain research things that I needed. Like, for example, I had a character who was into bugs, and so I had heard that a fly throws up when it lands on the counter, and I wanted him to say something about that. But it's very hard to find books in the library about fly vomiting habits. So for that one, I called ASU, the entomology department, and finally got a hold of it. But I remember it took me 2 weeks just to find these little details I needed to fill in. And now,
quick search.
Oh, so YouTube. If you need any sort of information, like how long, like one of the things I looked at was I have characters going in the 3rd Street Tunnel Bridge in DC, and I needed to know how long it was. I couldn't find that, but there's videos of people going through that tunnel, so I could just count off the seconds and know how long my characters are in there for.
So how about the way you write, though? Is that you talk about what was the point you brought up? Deep
point of view.
Deep point of view, or these other literary tools. Does that help a lot? It just
yeah.
Has it changed the way that you write compared to 23 years ago?
Not as much. I know more, but I also have like 40 writing books. I kind of hoard them. It's maybe a problem. I keep buying them even though I haven't read all the ones that I have. So there's a lot of information out there in physical form, but it is easier to just check on that specific item if you need it. But unfortunately, also with my writer friends, there'll be sometimes where I'm having a problem with a sentence or a paragraph, and I'll say, "This just doesn't work," and I text it to them and say, "Okay, what's wrong with this? How do I need to fix this?" And that's really nice to get instant feedback. Oh, one of the things Facebook is great for is if you need to find out where to hide a body, you put on Facebook,
interesting,
where would you hide a body? And then you worry about your friends because so many of them have apparently thought about this.
Right, they've got some pretty good ideas, huh?
Yeah. So I've been.
So you've got an instant survey.
Yes. Well, and also there's so many times you don't know anyone with the information, but somebody else does. I asked once where the flagpole was. I think it was on Capitol Hill, and somebody almost immediately sent me a picture of themselves in front of Capitol Hill with a flagpole in the back. So I mean, it's so nice to get that I know I'm on some NSA, FBI lists and stuff, because you're also Googling, the blueprints for the White House and body piercing armor and
right
and explosives and
yes,
that kind of thing. So serial killers and authors, we have interesting search history. But
what is for those of us who are not authors, when you write something and then you send it off to someone, text it to them, whatever, and say, this isn't working, what does that mean, it's not working?
Oh, well, a lot of times, just it'll seem clunky, or like one of the things I've started to develop some pet peeves as a writer.
Sure.
And so one of them is using the word "as" to show that things are happening simultaneously, because sometimes you need to use that, but so many new authors way overdo it, where you'll have 5 of those on the first page, and it starts to just, make you twitch.
Sure.
So the last one I did was, okay, I've done this with "as," but I don't know how to change it, but it's bothering me. And if it's, my friends were like, oh, yes, that's all wrong. And, sometimes you just have to step back. Or there'll be a lot of times where one beta reader will say, I didn't like this sentence, and I think it's fine. So then I ask other people, it's that survey again. Is this sentence okay or not? And and people have very strong opinions on that on Facebook also, surprisingly. I know too many.
What's good and what's not.
Yeah. If you use too many adjectives or adverbs, they'll tell you brutally.
To me, because I've actually tried to write before, it's not easy.
Oh, no.
It is really hard because it's taxing. I don't know if you feel that way, if it just kind of flows for you, but it's really taxing because you're putting yourself out there, number one. You want to put out something good, and it's a very taxing thing to go in and mentally, especially you're writing fiction, and put something together that, like you say, works. I've got one book that I started with its fiction several years ago, and I still have not gotten past the opening scene. Wow. And every couple of years, I'll go back and I'll rewrite it because I see that there's a lot of problems with it. But is it? Do you think that there is? If someone was talented like yourself as an author, why is that easier for somebody to do than somebody else? It's practice.
It's all talent is 90% practice. It's just rewriting it and rewriting it and learning more about. Because there are. Fortunately, and it's this way whether you're doing cake decorating or interior decorating, or there's rules of these are things you should follow to make things work, and these are things you shouldn't do. So the more of those you learn, the more time you save yourself. But because every story is new and different, it is sort of like you're reinventing the wheel every single time. Fortunately, there are some, like point of view. There's a rule about you stay in one person's head per scene or chapter. And so if you're jumping back and forth in between characters' heads, you will, get rejected from agents and editors and readers a lot of times too, because that's just usually sloppy writing. Once you learn that, then you don't have to fix that anymore, because so learning the rules helps, but at the same time, it's, for those joyous days when you didn't know what you were doing wrong and you just wrote and thought it was great.
Right. Because that's kind of the idea I think a lot of people might have, right? It's like this creative writing, right? I'm just going to write this and I've got a great idea for a story. But it's tough. It's taxing. Yeah. To go through. So you're in your 30th book, and you said how long? 23 years ago. So over a book a year. Yeah. And I noticed that you have different pen names.
Yes.
So what is that about?
Well, it's a marketing thing. Janette Rallison mostly writes young adult books, romantic comedies, sci-fi. No, wait, my sci-fi is under C.J. Hill. But mostly romantic comedies of some sort, young adult. And then Sierra St. James, the publisher didn't want...
Sierra St. James.
That was an LDS romance writing name I use. I haven't used that name in years. But they didn't want, they thought if people knew Janette Rallison books, they would just assume that those would be for 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds, and then they want you to have a different name for different genres. So C.J. Hill, the publisher, wanted me to appeal to boys, and as we all know, or at least the publishing world knows, that boys won't pick up a female author, especially if her books are next to sparkly fairy books and pink covers. So for those action adventure sort of books, I have that pen name, and then they put lots of fire and blackness on the covers, weapons, things.
Right. Yes.
So that's their way
Get
of
them to
tricking
pick it up.
boys into reading.
So I heard a story. Is it true that J.K. Rowling did not publish at first under her own name? Or is that why she used J.K.? That's what it was.
Because Harry Potter, that's a boy main character.
Sure.
So again, no girl, boys would read that, right?
Right. Like I don't even know what her J stands for.
Joe.
It's Joe.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So she does that. The same reason, right? She's to appeal to boys. They don't, for whatever reason, they don't want to read a female author.
Right. So and it is kind of an industry thing that girls will read books by male authors, but boys.
Why do you think that is?
Oh,
you got boys and girls, kids.
Well, I mean, there's different reasons, and part of it is just our society, and you have to look manly, But part of it is just, I remember my son. I remember those early naive days where you think that you're going to be that parent who encourages all sorts of. We're not going to have stereotypical toys. We'll just let them choose their. But my son very quickly let me realize why those stereotypes exist, because he only wanted sports and weapons, and he told me when he was about 13, because I kept on bringing him home books, and he finally told me, unless there's a weapon on the cover, I don't want to read it. I'm like, okay, so a different interest.
Yes. Okay. Now you've got one thing that you do is you write clean literature, right? And so there's been times where, it's been a few times, very few times, where I've actually gone with my wife to a Barnes & Noble when my daughters were young, and she'd go to the young adult section and go through it. And so I would be there. It's the only reason I would ever go through the young adult section. But I'm walking through and looking through. I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, honestly, even on the cover, some of the things that you see.
Very surprised what was
inside.
Yeah.
Yes. That's interesting. I mean, interesting. I don't know but because it really does cater to right there. You're looking 12 to 15 years old, maybe somewhere in there, primarily.
Yeah. They say, and I mean, it really also depends on the trends. The kids stop reading young adult books when they're about 16. Of course, then you had, with Twilight and Hunger Games, you had all sorts of adults reading those books. So it's not a hard and fast rule. But so young adult really only goes to 16, and the very, very adult, situations that are in the books are just, I mean, I think it's irresponsible.
I was shocked, honestly, because I did open up some of the books and kind of look through it. I couldn't believe what they were writing in there.
Yeah, when I was young, I would go to the library by myself and just randomly pick books, and there were only a couple of times that I got books that I felt were inappropriate. Now it's switched. You have to look and know which authors are the clean ones, or you're going to get.
And how many of those authors are there?
Not very many.
So it's a minority.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other books are selling.
Yes. What does that say about our society? Well, I mean, I guess that shouldn't surprise us because you look at what's on TV, and what's on the movies, and it's pretty hard to find something that you can, wholeheartedly recommend to your minister's family. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's always like, well, this is a really good series, but there's those few parts. I always feel like I have to warn people whenever I recommend anything, because it's just hard to find something that's just completely family friendly.
So it would be pretty important to warn new parents of young girls that this is out there. I mean, because their friends are going to be reading those kind of books, and they might have them at school, and they see them, and they say, "Hey, Mom, I want to get this book," and it's
well, and I think the danger, especially with where sexuality is concerned, is that it's really portrayed as normal and safe. I feel like, which
no
is
consequences.
It's not the case.
Exciting and romantic, and there's no consequences involved. Yeah.
And that guy's going to be around for, where in real life, those girls and boys, they break up so quickly. And I understand as an author, you don't want to write a romance and then he was gone 2 weeks later. Of course it's going to be true and enduring love when you're 17.
You want the ideal.
Right. But yeah, I just feel like we have to be careful, because we don't want to be encouraging behavior that's going to be damaging to young people, that's going to have long-lasting consequences in their life, and I've said this on I've been on groups with other young adult authors who were not LDS, and I said something once about they were talking about sex scenes, and I said, with all of the STDs and teen pregnancies, I think it's irresponsible to put sex scenes in books, to encourage that. And the claws came out viciously.
Which is amazing. I mean, and think if you would have gone to a spirituality argument.
Yeah, no. And
it would have been even worse.
Nothing about God at all. I was just saying, 1 in 6 people has herpes, and there's no cure for that. And
you're encouraging
condoms
this.
Do not protect that, because a lot of times authors will throw that. I don't know if this is where you wanted to go on this.
No, that's fine. That's the reality that they're facing, though.
Yeah.
And that's what where the girls are. I mean, they're going to have these issues if they're not.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in our society we kind of hide those issues. We don't really talk about.
It's messy.
It's not the ideal, and people need to know the dangers that are out there.
So in these groups that you have, so a lot of times you are with other young adult writers, and you might bring something like that up, but there's no issue for them with it at all.
No, I think they're like one of the authors said to me, I wouldn't buy a pair of shoes without trying it on. So I certainly would not be in a relationship without having sex.
Okay, that's one argument for someone who's 25.
I did not. I wanted to say you probably would have a different attitude about, trying on shoes if 1 in 6 gave you herpes.
Yeah.
But I was, at that point I figured I should just remain quiet for a while and not make enemies. But yeah, it's.
So now you've had over 1 million people buy your books. Mm-hmm. So, and you've got a website, and is that JanetteRallison.com?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've probably gotten a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Right? From parents and from readers, from young adults, mostly girls, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly girls.
So there's probably some positive feedback that comes from them
about
writing clean.
Yeah. About 50% of my emails are people saying, thank you for writing clean writing. So yeah, I mean, it's really nice. On the other hand, I'm like, okay, now I can't ever step over that line.
Right. Look out.
I had a conference once, a mom say to me, I just so appreciate your books, because I have a 12-year-old daughter and I can just hand them to her without reading them. And I kind of was like, wait, no, don't.
Right,
so you should still read them, because I don't know what her standards were exactly.
Sure.
And I would hate to feel responsible if I did or said.
Well, and everybody's different.
Right,
One 12-year-old could be very different from another 12-year-old, and what they're able to read and digest. Sense. So with that feedback, I mean, I'm guessing that's. I just going back to my Barnes and Noble experience. I think that I don't think I found, I mean, my wife had to show me what authors, in fact, I think when we went there, I think we saw your book on there, but we one of your books, but she had to go say, okay, I know that one, and I know this one is okay.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, honestly, when we say minority, it seems to me like it's maybe like 5%.
Yeah.
Even that would have been, at least for us, probably acceptable to have a 13 or 14-year-old girl read.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see. I'm sure somebody has done those numbers of, what percent don't have drugs or sex or swearing or, that kind of stuff in there.
Do you find it hard to write without inserting any of that? It sounds like you're keeping that in mind a lot.
It depends. I mean, there are some times when there are characters who would swear. And it's very hard as an author to go, okay, what do I do to make this dialogue realistic when I know this person would be swearing, but I know my readers don't want to hear that. So, I mean, usually I just say they cursed or, let out a stream of curses or something like that. And usually that's okay. But every once in a while you're like, that makes this dialogue hard because, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah. But you feel, so as you've built this up and you have all of these readers and you come out with another book right now, there's going to be obviously that expectation that you write a specific kind of book. And I'm guessing you feel that then as you write.
Definitely. This is the one I'm working on right now. It's number 5 of a series, and it's the last book, which I learned when you write a series, you get people. The day after the book comes out, they're asking you when the next book is coming out, and but I put something on Facebook about, because one of my author friends said, you have to kill some characters off in this book because here's this big fight and this climax. It will seem like it wasn't that hard if nobody dies. And so, but I hate books where authors just sort of seem to kill off characters for no apparent reason. So I asked on Facebook, and I was so surprised that the amount of passion of, no, don't you dare kill off characters, and don't kill off this character especially. And it was the only people who wanted me to kill off characters were other writers. Everybody else was like, no. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make the readers happy on this one.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie Misery or read the book Misery.
Oh, I heard about it. That's why can't I think of his name?
James Caan. Is it?
No.
I'm
yes. Stephen King.
Yes, it's Stephen King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where he gets into an auto accident, she drags him into her home,
crazy
and keeps him in there, and she's a fan of his, and he basically has to write his next book based on what she wants. Kind of crazy.
Yes, that's the fan we all worry about.
Yes. Have you been a member of the church your whole life, or your whole life? So where did you grow up?
Pullman, Washington.
In Pullman, Washington. Where is that?
That is,
is it on the eastern side?
I should know this. I mean, I do. I could point to it on a map. It's by Idaho. It's not the same side as Seattle.
Yeah. So you grew up in Pullman, and is that a college town?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad taught at WSU. So.
Really? Okay.
Small town, though.
And what did he teach?
Business and administration.
So what started in you that made you start thinking, okay, I want to be an author? When did you think that way as a kid, or?
Yeah, my mom, well, she died when I was 6, but she liked writing, and I remember seeing her type, things, and knew that she wanted to be a writer. So I think I always thought that was a normal profession, as opposed to a really difficult way to torture yourself. But so yeah, I've just always liked writing, and but I liked a lot of things, and so but I think it was, you get help spiritually to go the direction that you're supposed to go, and I think that was the case for me. This is a story. This sounds like an Ensign article, but it actually really happened, where I was thinking about writing, and I think I'd written some picture book manuscripts and sent them out, and 20 different publishers got back, I swear 25 rejection letters. I felt like they were, preemptively sending them to me. And I remember thinking, maybe this isn't for me. I was a dancer in high school, but I didn't try and become a professional dancer. I loved drama, but I didn't try and become a professional actress. So maybe this is just one of those things that I like as a hobby, but I'm never going to do anything with it. And I was walking to the mailbox and I was praying, let me know whether this is something I'm really supposed to do or not. And I go to the mailbox and I open it, and there's a letter from the New Era, which was strange because I only had preschooler. And I open it up and they say they have accepted my article, which was strange because I didn't send them one. And I just sort of stared at that, and then realized my dad. I had written a story about my dad, and I vaguely remembered him saying he was going to send it to the New Era. But of course, I didn't think anything. So here, and that was just this sort of message to me, like, yeah, this is something that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to pursue. So I feel like we're very blessed in that we can get help and direction, knowing what we're supposed to do with our life and which talents we're supposed to develop, and maybe it's not. Not everybody has to do it as a profession, but being creative is part of our spiritual DNA. So it's just something we're supposed to do in some.
But some of us might have a little more of that DNA than others.
Oh, well, I think
I don't have a whole lot of that DNA. Sometimes I feel like I can tap into it. I had it's the strangest thing. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and when I was young, I built with a friend. We built a small little software package. Well, I'm not a programmer. I don't know anything about it. I just had an idea, and that eventually led me into running a web development firm, and it got pretty big, and we got pretty big with it. But I ended up like art directing some of this stuff, and I thought, this isn't me at all, but I could feel like, okay, I actually am tapping into something that might be there, and essays and in college and in high school. They're terrible stories. I write terrible stories, but I thought, oh, maybe I do have a little bit of creativity there somewhere.
If you're being an entrepreneur, then that takes creativity.
I guess so.
We kind of have these ideas of talents as like singing and playing the piano, but there's so many different ways to be creative. We both know a handyman, Taylor, who he is this artist with caulking, and painting and tile, and that is his creative outlet. And I'm really glad he likes that, because I don't want to caulk things. But it's good that we all have different areas that we have. And entrepreneurs, that sounds like a scary thing to do, but that's maybe how you use your creativity.
Now, so you were a dancer in high school?
Yeah.
And you did, what was the other thing you said you did?
Drama.
Drama. Okay, so drama and dancing and writing. So those are all artistic.
Yeah.
So you lean toward artistic. Yeah. A lot.
I guess.
Your husband's a rocket scientist.
Yes.
So how did that happen? Just yin and yang? Or?
Yes, I think so. It's really funny. I was talking to online writers and saying something about my husband being, Dilbert, math man. And every single one of them was like, me too. I married an accountant. And it's really interesting that so many artistic, at least writers, marry men that are very logical in math, and maybe we need that so we don't starve to death. Someone has to remember what day to take out the garbage.
Right.
But and I'm sure it's, with designing rockets, you have to have creativity too. You just have to have math along with that.
Along with math and creativity.
And patience and things that I don't have.
So 30 books, and you have 5 kids? Is that right?
I was pregnant with twins when I got my first contract.
Pregnant with twins. So how do you manage that, right? Have you had a full-time job outside of that ever? Okay, so you've got family, which is a full-time job, and writing. Yeah,
and I'm not a fast writer either. I have friends that have a bunch of kids, and they have 2 hours, and could just do 10 pages in 2 hours. Whereas for me, 10 pages takes about 10 hours. So I'm not fast, but But fortunately, I've been able to cut things out of my life, where don't ask me how many times I cleaned my fridge during the last 23 years or mopped the floor. But yeah, it's with writing, if you can write a couple of pages a day, that's 730 pages by the end of the year. So you can write in just little chunks. And for a lot of years, that's what I was doing. It's nice now that I can write in bigger chunks. But, the funny thing is, I only have one child still left at home, but you're still just, as a parent, they leave home, but they still need you for stuff.
Yes, so we're empty nesters now, and it's still busy.
Yeah,
it's still busy.
Yeah.
So, and in some ways, maybe the responsibility grows even a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right.
You're babysitting grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not there yet, but you are. Yeah. So, stories. I'm fascinated with stories, and most of them, for example, in the scriptures even, right? I love all of the stories, the church history and the stories in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I remember once I had a friend who was teaching Sunday school one day, and he brought this up. He said, now is something to the effect of, is truth fiction or nonfiction? And I thought, well, obviously it's nonfiction. I mean, it's truth, right? And then he proceeded to go in and say, well, how did Jesus teach? Right, and he taught through parables, right? He taught through stories that maybe he's drawing from other stories, or maybe he's drawing from things he's seen, but they're stories mostly, right? They're stories that are not necessarily about anybody specific, and so he's teaching through fiction, and he's teaching truth through fiction. And that really changed my mind, because I'm not a fiction person at all. I've always been, I think your husband's a little the same way, but I don't, here's my rule. I will read nonfiction, and I read a lot of nonfiction. Now with podcasts and Audible, I'll listen to fiction. Yeah. So it's kind of like I almost need it spoon-fed to me. So I do now listen to a lot more fiction than I used to. Honestly, Janette, I think I probably went 15 or 20 years without reading a fiction book. It's so boring. That's so boring. Yeah. It is.
History is pretty interesting, though. I mean, sometimes I read history and I think, why do we do fiction? Because there's nothing we could come up with that, there's no dystopians that are worse than World War II. And
right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But no, stories, as people, we're hardwired for stories. I mean, we crave them. We need them. We pay money to hear other people's very false story. You know what I mean? Like that we're going to go watch about superheroes and talking animals and whatever, but just because we crave stories so much. So there's something to fiction, but I think also we have to choose our fiction wisely, make sure it is telling us truths,
Yeah, that's a good point. So you can write fiction that doesn't tell you very good truths, or
James Bond.
Right.
This man who goes around killing people without any consequence, or like mental disturbance, and just sleeping with women. There's no consequences for anything.
No, that's very true. Yeah. That's very true.
That's probably why I'm not a fan of James Bond.
So, I'd read somewhere. When I started writing this book, which I am still at the opening scene on. I had bought a software package. And it kind of goes through it. What they had explained to me was that it's a lot what directors use, or screenwriters would use. And I'm trying to remember how many there are, but basically there's like these 24 elements, or there can be 24 different types of stories that can happen. And it actually runs you through the grid of where is the story going to go, and there's this option and this option. You have tragedy, you have conflict, you have winning or success and failure, but it runs you kind of through that. When you write after 30 books, is a lot of that the same? Do you feel it's just you're telling it about a different person?
Well, that's a good question. There's some things that are going to be the same. I mean, there's every story is about a character who has a problem, and the story is about their goal to overcome the problem. Whether that's Cinderella and her problem of being stuck with horrible family, or Frodo who needs to get rid of a ring. They have a problem, so they have goals and they have obstacles. And it's not easy, because then it would be a very short, boring book. So they're going to run into probably an antagonist. An antagonist is usually a person, but it can be nature or whatever. It's just something that's opposing the main character's goals. And then there's a consequence of failure. There's something bad happens if the character doesn't reach their goal. Because if nothing bad happened to Frodo, if he kept the ring, then why do we care whether, what happens to it? So those elements always have to be in a story.
The journey is a sense, right? You're bringing the reader along the journey of the conflict,
right,
or the problem,
right. And it is sort of a weird thing that we want to read about people who have horrible problems that we would never want to experience in our real life. Like, oh, it was great.
Yeah, that's true.
They're being chased by those wraithy, scary people or monkeys with wings, Thus begins Janette's lifelong hatred of chimpanzees from Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. But yeah, why, I guess it's a safe way to experience conflict and know that it will come out, or at least hope that it will come out positively in the end. I always feel really cheated when I read a book and then it ends badly, dismally, because the whole time you're going, well, how is this going to work out? How are they going to be able to pull this off? And then they don't, and you're just like, what? I'm so mad at that author now.
I've invested all this time into this.
Yeah, because we want to hear about people overcoming their problems and solving their problems, and because I think that gives us hope that we can overcome those problems in our own life. But there's.
So you think that has something to do with? Would that have something to do with if, as an author, if you're able to bring a reader through the story where you feel attached to that, somehow they're going to have a success? That would be something that would be a successful story, and that readers would want to read. Yeah, that there's some hope. Even if the character does not get what they want, because characters don't always have to achieve their goals. Mm-hmm. But they've learned something. There's some hope. There's growth. Which that mirrors our own lives. Because a lot of times we don't get what we wanted, but we look back on our trials and realize, oh, how much I've grown. So yeah, and I know with the scriptures, Greg, you're always likening those to Christ and to. And I think a lot of times fiction is that same journey of obstacles, of antagonists, of which the prophets and Christ, they face that again and again. Mm-hmm. So Joseph Campbell had the hero with 1,000 faces, mm-hmm. and somebody told me once, I wish I could remember who it was, that those are all just types of Christ, and the ideal hero. I was like, yeah, not really, but as I've gotten older and studied that hero's journey more, I'm like, yeah, I can see why people say that that's mm-hmm. a type of Christ, because he was that ultimate hero, mm-hmm. That faced, everything, and was able to overcome. Yeah, the ideal hero in that. So, it's interesting too, because in the scriptures, a lot of it is tragedy. Yeah. Right. I mean, we read stories in there where even, you have, of course, the story of like Abraham, ultimately there's success there. Right. But it's after unbelievable turmoil. But like in the Book of Mormon, mostly that's tragedy. Yeah. Right. They just can't seem to get it right. Yeah. And they keep falling away. Yeah. And in the end, Israel too. They're done. They're wiped out, and so in the end, it's a tragedy, but I suppose there's lessons from tragedies, right? Yeah.
definitely. So there, we also get the warnings along with the, these are not good things to do. Don't do those things in your real life.
Yeah.
But there, and even, you look at Abraham, well, and or Jacob. I mean, a lot of them, when you feel like your kids are fighting and your family life is, not less than ideal, then you look, well, Adam and Eve had one of their sons kill another one, and
that's not good.
So we learn from the scriptures that life is not easy for anybody, even for the prophets.
Right, very true. You had, I'd gone through and looked online, and you had a blog post on women in the priesthood.
Wow.
I think that, looking at the time frame on that, but I think that was about the time of the ordained, is it ordained women? Yeah, ordained women type thing.
All of the ordained women
Yeah.
was going really strong, and I just kept on thinking, why do you, you're asking for more work, stop it.
So it's a pretty clever post that you have. I think that's on your website.
Yeah.
But it's pretty clever the way you wrote it. Is that what got you going on that, to write that? I mean, why did you feel like you wanted to write something about that?
Well, I think because I felt like on one hand I knew where they were coming from, because growing up I sort of had some of those same feelings. I remember feeling like, well, it's sort of unfair that men get the priesthood and women don't. And, it's sort of unfair that women are expected to be mothers, and specifically stay-at-home mothers, where fathers get to be fathers and then also have careers. So I sort of, and I would hear people saying, I mean, like my mother told me, well, God had to give men the priesthood because he'd given women the power of creation. And so he had to give them something. He gave the best gift to the women. And I remember kind of feeling like that was maybe a little patronizing.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then when that completely changed when I had a baby. And then suddenly I was like, no, all those people who said that motherhood is the most important career, they were right. And I didn't want to go have a career. I wanted to stay home and raise my daughter. And I thought, wow, women really we do have the best situation here. And I feel, I'm all for equality for women, but I feel like our society is going about it in the wrong way. We're devaluing women's traditional role of being that mother and that homemaker, and saying that's not an important role. When really what we should say is that's the most important role. That's the most important thing anybody does in our society is be a parent. Unfortunately, somebody has to, make the money, and so I'm totally fine with women getting the best gig there, Mm-hmm. And I guess the surprising thing is that nobody, there was many comments on that post, but nobody was like, what, you're kind of insulting men in this, And I'm glad, because men are maybe better at dealing with jabs than women can be sometimes. But yeah, I just kind of told this little story of women in the pre-existence after the council in heaven, talking to God about all their responsibilities and saying, what, I think we're going to need lots of help. And God says to them, well, the men will help you if you ask. And the women say, we're not so sure about that. We know men, and they're already talking about sitting around watching football. And how about you give them jobs and tell them that only they can do those jobs? And God says, well, don't you think they'll notice if they have all these extra responsibilities and meetings, and we tell them that only they can do them? And the women say, well, maybe if you give them important sounding names like bishop and stake president, then they'll be okay with that. And so anyway, but how I look at it is, I'm really glad when church ends and I get to go home and I know the bishopric is staying. So a lot of times my husband has been, clerk a bunch of times, and so he's staying there too. And I'm really happy that we don't have that responsibility. And then to hear women say, like, wait, no, this is unfair. It's like the priesthood is all about service and blessing other people's lives. So if you don't feel like you have enough service and blessing people's lives, there's nothing to stop you from going and doing that. But I'm for one glad that See, this sounds like I'm bashing men when I say this, but I'm glad that that we've told men, no, these are your responsibilities and you have to do them, because I worry that men wouldn't step up to the plate otherwise. And seeing, doesn't that make me sound really bad and cynical? But
well, there's probably some truth to that. I mean,
I've seen in other churches where they've complained about, how do you get the men to do so much in your church? Because the women are carrying a lot of the load in these other churches.
There's some truth to that. I think, I think that, and being stereotypical here, I suppose, but I think practical also. I think that women are stronger social beings. And so, they're the glue to everything, and they kind of make things happen with people. And so it's a lot easier for a guy not to get involved, I think, than it is for a woman. It's fascinating to me to watch what's happening in society right now with the change of roles with men and women, and kind of where it's going. I have my own theories on this, but it seems like it's a pattern that happens a lot in society, and not just ours, but in previous society, even anciently. And I think there's kind of a narrative that's out there that, okay, kind of women have been more oppressed, and it's been a man's world, which is partially true. But I think that as you get further into a more sophisticated society, Sophia, it's a woman. It's you move into a place where there's less need for protection. There's less need for how are we going to eat today. There's less of a need for manual labor, and so you move more into a place where women kind of rise to the top a little bit more. I think it happened in Rome. I think it happens in societies as they get into that kind of uber sophisticated place where there is not as much of a threat. And I think that's happening now with us, and then with technology, obviously. I mean, it's just all this change in technology that's happened from the domestic side of things that can make things much easier, and now there's not as much of a demand at home with certain things. Honestly, with the pill has made a huge change on certain responsibilities.
Just think in the last, 200 years, how much society has changed. I went through Cove Fort, and one of the things that they emphasized was there was always something to do, and you had better do it, because if you didn't, you might die. And I thought about that, like how different our lives are now, where we don't have to worry about, if I don't get those crops planted, I'm going to die. And so it's great that it's opened up all of these opportunities for us to be writers and be artists and do all of these things that, in societies, these people probably didn't have the opportunities that we have because they were so busy just trying to survive.
Yes.
But I just feel like, and it's great that we can do all of these things, but we need to remember that being a parent is the most important. That's the basic, most fundamental, important thing in our society. And I worry that our society has this attitude of, I've seen it from people of sort of like, to women say, why would you be a stay-at-home mom? That's like drudgery. You pay somebody to do that, like you would manual labor. And just that attitude is really frightening, because it's like, no, that's our most important role in society. We shouldn't look at that in the same way as like washing dishes, and it matters what happens to those little children, and it matters if we have children.
Well, doesn't that? It seems to me that it's a reflection on yourself as to what value you have. In other words, you were a kid at one point, right? You were a kid, and you were important, and you're still important.
And I think maybe I'm one of the few people in my generation. My mother was sick from the time I was 2, so I was put off in daycare, and I remember that, and I remember that. That was a different feeling. That was a feeling of, you were a group, go play, don't bother the adults, as opposed to being loved and nurtured and really valued. I mean, it wasn't that anything bad happened to me in daycare, but it was just a very different environment than that kind of loving home where a mom is sitting you down and reading a book to you and just talking to you one-on-one. So, I mean, that's probably partially where my feelings come on that issue, I'm sure.
You had a different experience than those around you. Did you feel like an outsider?
I guess, a little bit I did. I didn't feel as secure in those daycare settings.
And you grew up in an LDS environment.
Yeah, my parents were LDS.
Yeah. And so your friends probably had stay-at-home moms. Yeah. So it was different.
Yep.
Do you see roles in the church for men and women changing more?
That's an interesting question. I mean, when I always feel like, this is another thing that people always have this idea about, well, in this patriarchy of Mormonism, the women are oppressed. And I think, no, you obviously have never, I mean, of course there's always guys who are jerks in any culture. And there's always,
Yes.
Even in a sort of more oppressive cultures, there's always men who are going to love their mothers and wives and daughters and, but I think our society, because we teach the men that these are children of, these are daughters of God and they have value and there's no double standards, and we're trying to teach both the young men and the young women to reach their potential, to strive to be better, to think of the future. We're trying to instill these good values in them, and I think, where else do you find that? Not in the drinking, sleeping around drug culture that's out there. That's not valuing those young women like we're trying to teach our young men to do. So I feel like it's 180 degrees opposite of what a lot of people think it is, that they see women as oppressed, and instead I feel like, no, we're valued here.
It's interesting. Like sometimes I'll see, being that I've been online a lot more lately with the other podcast, I see these comments sometimes. Like I'll go through and I'll look at some comments from women who have left the church, and the word that they love to use is emancipated. They're emancipated from, like you said, kind of like this patriarchy or something. And it's hard for me to say something to them because I'm a guy, and what are they going to say about, coming from me? I don't know that it has a whole lot of value of I don't get it. I guess I don't understand where you're coming from.
And I've heard stories from women too that, this bishop said this or this, and I mean, that may have happened, but in my own experience, the men in the church have not been that way at all. They've treated me like I was important, like my thoughts were important. I mean, there's nothing to emancipate me from,
Right.
I don't think that there's a better anything out there.
Well, I agree, but I'm a guy, so
You're a guy, so you don't get
I don't have a voice.
say in this.
Exactly. So anyway, well, thank you for coming on and spending some time with me on this. JanetteRallison.com is where they can go, and can they go to Amazon, and people can go to Amazon and find your books on there, and everybody go out and buy your books.
Yeah, do.
Appreciate it. Thank you.